I'd always heard that working the night shift at McDonald's was boring but easy. The restaurant would stay open 24/7, and most nights were uneventful, just the occasional late-night customer looking for a quick bite. I took the job because I needed the extra cash, and honestly, I wasn't expecting anything strange. But then, there was that one night. The night that made me quit. It was a Tuesday, close to 2 a.m., and I was the only one left in the store besides my manager, Greg, who was locked in the office doing paperwork. We didn't get many customers at this hour, so I was mostly cleaning up, waiting for the minutes to tick by. The glow of the overhead lights and the hum of the kitchen equipment gave the place an eerie, almost artificial feeling. Everything felt off. Around 2:30, the bell above the door jingled. A man walked in, but there was something about him that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. He was tall, with a disheveled appearance. His clothes were dirty, his hair was greasy, and he had this vacant look in his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. But what really made me uneasy was the way he was grinning. This wide, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't approach the counter right away. Instead, he stood near the entrance, staring at the menu board for far longer than anyone should. I cleared my throat, trying to break the silence. "Can I help you?" He snapped his head toward me, that creepy grin never faltering. "Just a burger, please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I punched in his order, and as I turned around to prepare it, I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. When I handed him the bag, he took it without saying a word, just smiling that same eerie smile. I watched him walk to a booth in the far corner of the restaurant, where he sat, still staring at me. I tried to shake off the uneasiness and return to my cleaning, but as I was wiping down the counters, I heard a soft tapping sound. I looked up and saw the man sitting there, tapping the edge of his tray with a fork. He wasn't eating, just staring at me, tapping. I pretended not to notice and kept cleaning, but the tapping grew louder, faster, until it was impossible to ignore. I glanced over again, and this time, he was standing up, tray in hand. He started walking toward the counter, the tapping growing more frantic with each step. I backed away, my heart racing. Is there a problem?" I stammered. He stopped in front of the counter, his grin now impossibly wide. "The burger! It's wrong," he whispered, placing the untouched tray down with a loud clatter. I stared at the tray, confused. I had made the burger exactly as ordered. "I'm sorry, what's wrong with it?" His grin faltered for the first time, twisting into something more sinister. You're what's wrong." Before I could react, he slammed his hand down on the counter, hard enough to rattle the cash register. His expression was dark, eyes wild. "I didn't come here for food," he growled. "I came here for you." At that point, my heart felt like it was about to explode out of my chest. I backed away slowly, inching toward the office door where Greg was. I think you should leave," I managed to say, though my voice was trembling. He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me with those crazy eyes and that horrible grin. My hands fumbled for the office door, but before I could get it open, he spoke again. This time, his voice was deeper, almost inhuman. "I'm not leaving until I get what I came for." In a panic, I banged on the office door. Greg, help." But there was no response. I turned to look at the man, but he was gone, vanished, as if he had never been there. The door to the restaurant was still closed, and I hadn't heard it open. I scanned the room, trying to figure out where he could have gone, but there was no sign of him. Just an empty restaurant, and that creepy silence. Suddenly, I heard something behind me, a whisper, so close it felt like it was right in my ear. "I'm still here." I spun around, but again, there was no one there. The restaurant was completely empty. The only sound was the hum of the kitchen equipment and my own heavy breathing. I bolted for the office and locked myself inside. Greg was slumped over his desk, fast asleep, oblivious to everything that had just happened. I shook him awake, yelling about the man, about how we needed to call the police. But when he finally got up and went to check the security cameras, there was no footage of the man. No record of him entering the store. No sign that he had ever been there at all. I quit the next day, and to this day, I can't explain what happened. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that man, about his grin, and I wonder if he's still out there, waiting for his next victim. I used to work the drive-thru shift at McDonald's. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills, and honestly, the late-night shift was usually pretty chill. Most of the time, it was just me, a skeleton crew in the kitchen, and a handful of drunk customers rolling in after the bars closed. But one night, something happened that made me rethink everything. It was a Tuesday night, one of those slow, dead shifts where barely anyone shows up after midnight. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to kill time, when the headset crackled to life. "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" I said automatically, without looking up from my phone. There was silence on the other end, just static. Sometimes the headset would glitch, so I thought nothing of it at first. "Hello?" I tried again. This time, a voice crackled through. But it wasn't a normal voice. It was deep, raspy, and slow, almost like someone was struggling to speak. "I'm hungry." I paused, my finger hovering over the screen of my phone. Something about the voice made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It sounded distorted, almost as if it wasn't coming from a person at all. "Okay, what would you like to order?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The voice responded after a long pause. "I'm outside." That was weird. I hadn't seen any cars pull up to the drive-thru window. The cameras that showed the outside lane were right in front of me, and they were showing nothing but an empty lot, dimly lit by the streetlights. "I don't see you," I said, glancing at the monitor again. "I'm here." The voice sounded closer now, almost as if the person was right outside the window. I stood up, feeling a growing sense of unease. I peeked out the drive-thru window and looked around, but the parking lot was completely empty. No cars, no people, just the flickering light of the street lamp at the far end of the lot. I'm sorry, I don't see you," I said, my voice shaky. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, the voice returned, but it was different now. It sounded like several voices layered on top of each other, speaking in unison. "Look closer." My stomach dropped. I pulled off the headset and leaned out the drive-thru window, straining to see if there was anyone out there. Nothing, just the empty lot. But then, as I was about to pull back inside, I saw something, a shadow, standing near the edge of the light. It was hard to make out, but it looked like a figure, tall and thin, just standing there, completely still. "Hello?" I called out, though I wasn't sure why. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, barely visible in the flickering light. I squinted, trying to get a better look, but before I could make out any details, the streetlight went out with a loud pop, plunging the lot into darkness. I jumped, my heart racing. When the light flickered back on a moment later, the figure was gone. I shut the drive-thru window and stepped back, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't know what to do. I was the only one working the front. The kitchen staff were in the back, oblivious to what had just happened. I debated telling my manager, but I didn't want to sound crazy. Maybe it was just some prank. Maybe I was imagining things. But then, the headset crackled again. "I'm still here." My blood ran cold. I grabbed the headset and threw it down on the counter. I wasn't dealing with this anymore. I wasn't paid enough for whatever was happening. I walked to the back to tell my manager that I needed a break. As I passed the drive-thru window, I couldn't resist glancing outside one last time. And that's when I saw it. The figure was back, but now it was closer, much closer, standing right outside the window, staring in. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could make out its eyes, glowing white eyes locked onto mine. I froze, unable to move, my heart hammering in my chest. And then, slowly, it raised a hand and pointed directly at me. I stumbled back, slamming into the counter. By the time I looked again, the figure was gone, vanished, like it had never been there. I ran to the back, barely able to breathe, and told my manager I was done for the night. I didn't care if he thought I was crazy. I grabbed my stuff and left. I never went back to that McDonald's. To this day, I don't know what I saw that night, or who, or what was standing outside that window. But every time I pass a McDonald's late at night, I can't help but look over my shoulder just to make sure it's not still watching me. I worked at McDonald's for about a year, mostly doing closing shifts. The job was easy enough, just cleaning up, taking care of the last few customers, and locking up by midnight. I never minded working late, but there was always something about that last hour before closing that felt strange. There was a stillness to the place, especially after 11 p.m. The customers thinned out, and the dining area would be empty except for the occasional late-night straggler. The hum of the fryers and the distant sound of traffic outside were the only things that kept me company during those quiet hours. But then there was that one night, the night I realized something was seriously wrong. It was a Wednesday. I remember that because Wednesdays were always dead. It was just me and my coworker, Alyssa, finishing up our last orders and prepping to close. She was in the back washing dishes while I wiped down the counters up front. The lights outside were dim, and the parking lot was empty except for a single car sitting at the far end. I hadn't seen anyone come in or out of it for hours. At around 11:30, the doorbell chimed. I looked up, surprised to see someone coming in this late. A man walked in, a tall, thin figure dressed in all black. His hood was pulled up, covering most of his face, but I could see his eyes. They were wide, bloodshot, and unfocused, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't say anything when he approached the counter, just stood there, staring at the menu board. Can I help you?" I asked, trying to hide the uneasiness in my voice. The man didn't respond right away. He kept staring up at the menu like he was trying to figure something out. Then, without looking at me, he said in a low, raspy voice, "I'll take whatever's fresh." I glanced at the fryer. We hadn't made anything fresh in over an hour, so I started to tell him we didn't have anything hot. But before I could get the words out, he slammed his hand on the counter. I said, "Whatever's fresh." His voice had changed. It was deeper now, angrier, almost inhuman. I froze, feeling a chill run down my spine. Okay. Give me a minute," I stammered, backing into the kitchen. I found Alyssa and told her about the guy, how weird he was acting. She glanced through the kitchen window to look at him and shrugged. "Probably just some drunk guy. Let's get him a burger and get him out of here," she said. I nodded, trying to shake the growing feeling of dread, and we quickly made him a fresh burger. When I brought it out to him, he was still standing at the counter, staring straight ahead. He didn't even acknowledge me when I placed the bag in front of him. "There you go," I said, stepping back. The man reached for the bag, his long, pale fingers brushing against mine as he took it. His touch was ice cold. He didn't say thank you, didn't even look at me. He just turned and walked out the door without a word. I watched as he crossed the parking lot and got into the car that had been sitting there all night. But something was off. The headlights didn't turn on, and the engine never started. He just sat there, motionless. I was about to turn away when I noticed something strange. Through the dim light, I could see someone, or something, else sitting in the passenger seat. It was small, hunched over, with a face that looked wrong, twisted, distorted, like it didn't belong on a human body. It stared directly at me, and I felt frozen, unable to look away. I blinked, and suddenly the figure was gone. The man, the car, everything, just gone. 1 second, they were there, and the next, the parking lot was completely empty. I stood there, heart racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Alyssa came up behind me, asking what was wrong, but I couldn't find the words to explain it. "Let's just lock up and get out of here," I muttered, still shaken. We hurried through the rest of the closing routine, eager to leave. As we were locking the front door, I glanced back at the parking lot one last time, and that's when I saw it. The car was back, sitting in the same spot, with the same dark figure behind the wheel. And this time, I could see them clearly. The man was staring right at me, and the twisted, hunched figure was leaning forward in the passenger seat, its wide, glowing eyes locked onto mine. I slammed the door shut and bolted it, telling Alyssa to hurry. We left through the back, not daring to look again. The next morning, I told my manager what had happened, but he just brushed it off, saying I must have been tired or seeing things. But I know what I saw. I quit a week later. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about that place, that there was something lurking in the darkness, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if that man is still out there, sitting in that car, watching.